feet tangled in the gnarled roots of the old apple tree, and I tumbled headfirst onto the dirt. I was playing in my family's backyard. My nose was red, and I was rubbing my sore nose. The sun was bolting down harsh rays onto my backyard. I had been protected from it by an old apple tree. Grass refused to grow near the tree, leaving the ground dry and earthy. The cut of freshly cut grass and the crackling of leaves. The green glow of sun-brightened grass just out of reach emitted onto my back and the towering presence of the tree. I readjusted myself and freed my foot. However, as I lifted my foot, I saw it, hidden just underneath the root, blanketed in a black shadow. Light barely reached into the crevice, like staring into an ink pot, a shining pupil leering back. Then I saw it, the sparkle of metal hidden beneath the earth. My fingers pawed at the shimmer. They dug the piece of metal from out under the root. It seemed to be an old discus or metal. It had a smooth outer edge and an engraved top of some kind. The texture of the metal was rough and uneven, like it was made in an old smithy, cold metal covered in dirt and rust. Fishing it out, I found that it wasn't anything special. There was some kind of old insignia on the front of it, maybe a bird, maybe an eye, something else. Years of weathering had smoothened out the surface into an unreadable blob. I didn't know what it was, but I was a kid, so I stuck it in my pocket without thinking. Lunch is ready. My mom had called me to go have lunch. My day went on as usual. Eat, watch TV, play with toys, go on the internet on Mom's computer while she's out for work. But I couldn't sleep. My friends had agreed to a sleepover that night. I was too excited. We'll have so much fun. The next day, I got home from school and I threw myself onto the couch. My mouth was fixed in a smile. However, I was tired, and my body felt like it was melting like butter on a hot skillet, practically melting into the furniture. I spent the next few hours laughing at cartoons and anything on the TV. My sides hurt, and my skull might explode. My face almost hurt from how much I was laughing at the TV. A shadow twitches. My eyes almost didn't catch it. They were glued onto the TV like a hawk. My brain finishes processing what I saw. My eyes zip to that corner. Nothing. It's nothing, then I shouldn't worry. The brain tricks itself into seeing weird stuff all the time. After that disturbance, time slowly picks up again. Pedestrians and strangers pass by on the sidewalk like the pendulum of a grandfather clock, a steady rhythm of people walking up and down the street. Eventually, they turn into a blur and then disappear altogether. Music, sound, and light from the TV distract. The hours clock by, and it's starting to get late. Ring, ring. The pedestrians return to their steady rhythm. The wall phone had begun to ring. Hello? Who is it? One of my friend's moms was calling. They couldn't make the sleepover today. They were going on a sudden trip to see their grandpa. I put the phone down. That tends to happen from time to time. Nothing you can do about it. It still wanted to hang out, though. Ring, ring, ring. Again. Another one of my friends can't make it. A sudden trip to the Florida. I feel the energy leave me. However, there should be one more friend coming over. Ring, ring, ring. Silence? That's odd. I think to put the receiver back onto the wall. However, a static sound finally came from the receiver, labored breathing, like someone who had run a mile, slow and heavy. Last invitee, sudden trip. My gut sinks, like a stone had been dropped into it. I turn around to look around me. Nothing out of the ordinary. The house is fine. However, in the window, you see something odd. Hidden in the shade of a tree, there is a phone box for pedestrians. Light from the sun bounces off the floor and illuminates the forms of the box and anything around it. There is an unclear figure holding onto the box's receiver. The reflected light illuminated everything aside from them. "What do you want?" There is no response. Dejected, I put the receiver down. If I can't get anything from the phone, I'll ask him myself. Furrowing my brow, I kick open the door to face the figure myself. But there was nothing but hot air where it stood. The false bravado crashes, and I return to where I stood. My legs are starting to feel like wafer cookies, the layers practically splaying out and crumbling under my weight. Still, I manage to shuffle back inside. My legs topple, and I land face first on the couch. The wind was knocked out of my chest. My eyes felt heavy, and a wave of exhaustion crashed over me. Moonlight streamed in from the windows, and there was a note on the coffee table. It read, "Work dinner. I left food in the fridge." I made my way to the fridge. I felt like a piece of meat that you'd leave out to defrost. The food is some stale Chinese takeout still in the box. I stretch yawn like a cat, smacking my lips together. I flick on the light switches around the house as the soft hum of the microwaves fills the house. The memories of what happened this evening return to me, and I shudder just thinking about it. A cold sweat running down the side of my face. Beep, beep, beep. The microwave screams you can barely hear anything over the sound. This would have been nicer if my friends were here. I could be watching movies or playing games. Something. Slam. It came from the back door. Someone's here. The takeout box slips from my hand, the box for the takeout clattering onto the floor as noodles and vegetables spill out. I run into my room, looking wildly in every direction, making sure that whatever was in there didn't see me. The house creaked and groaned, the floorboards arching up almost ready to snap. The walls of my bedroom were closing in on me, the sharp corners shooting out at wild angles, crushing and collapsing. I felt a sack of bricks. I rolled myself under my bed, the bedsheet draped over the frame like a curtain. You could almost see through them, however you wouldn't be able to make out the shape of anything hidden behind it. Muffled footsteps approached the door. Thud, thud. An elongated shadow reached from under the door like a hand grasping at me. My heart is racing. An old tractor engine going at full blast. It will break down. I press closer to the floor. The dusty smell of the old wood and mold was overpowered by a strong stench. Like rotten eggs and sewage, if you could run your hand through the smell, it would be like thick sludge with pieces of half-digested jelly things running across your hand. "I know you are there," a voice rasped, low and menacing. A small, crumpled piece of paper slid under the door frame. The momentum launched it into the air, where it then soared down in front of me. I risked a glance at it. I froze. Panic lashed at me like a whip. Scrawled on it was a crudely drawn sketch, lines swirling with abandon, chaotic and free. They almost felt alive. It was the disc metal thing that I found. "Return it, and I will leave you be, or else." The stench began to dissipate, and the room slowly came at ease. The floorboards loosened, the walls stretched and grew, and my heart was slowing down. That was it. I spent the rest of the night tucked under the bed, no longer terrified, but still anxious to leave. The next day I returned the metal to where it was. To this day, I don't feel comfortable in my home. However, it seems that I was able to rectify the mistake that I had made. I knew her. In all my years of work, I've developed a strange relationship with death. I see it as something purely physical. The body in front of me is just an organism that stopped living. That's all that it is. And yet, it took me by surprise to have her on my table. I'd seen her around the hospital before, excited, glowing, talking about what her life would look from now on. She was a bit distracted sometimes, saying that great things were coming, but I didn't expect her to die right before giving birth. She was found drowned in her own home, with writings on her wrists and on the back of her neck, and she'd been laying in her bathtub for days before her neighbor found her. She had no husband, no relatives. They expected me to rule it as a suicide. I didn't believe that, since it made no sense. Why would she kill herself right before giving birth? Right before becoming a mother, a thing she'd been so excited about? I'd been called in the middle of the night to work on her. They said her body was already in a pretty fragile state, and I needed to be precise and fast before they could wrap this tragedy up. I won't weight you down with all the gory details. I'll just go over the process really fast so that you'll get an idea of what I do. First came some of the paperwork and observations, along with the external examination and photographs. I didn't notice anything besides the obvious signs of drowning and damage done by the 3 days spent in the bathtub. Although, if I'm being honest, but that might have been just me, I thought that the skin surrounding the writing, wrists, neck, was lighter than the rest and harder. Next came the internal examination. I'd been plagued by a wave of sadness, not wanting to move on with the procedure, but I tensed up and kept on working. Again, the usual signs of drowning. I froze with the instruments in hand. I was the only one in the morgue, or, at least, the only one alive, and it might have been the lack of sleep or the general eerie atmosphere that was making me feel unsure of what I was seeing. There was no earthly way she could have made those carvings on her ribs. Tiny carvings of the same symbols. My throat was dry, which made me feel like I was choking on air, and suddenly the collar of my scrub felt too tight for me. It wasn't my imagination. Her ribs were covered in these carvings. Could it be some bone-eating bacteria? I knew it was pointless to even ask that question, because I knew it wasn't. I took out my phone to take a close-up of the ribs. I know that wasn't too professional, but I had no choice. The moment I took the picture, something clattered in the distance. I looked up to the door to the hallway. No one should be here. I took a sharp breath and carefully put my gloves back on, feeling the blood slowly drain from my face as I worked my way down to her amniotic sac. I was expecting to see something that would make my skin crawl, and I knew that no matter how hard I braced myself, it would still hit me hard. When I opened it, it was empty. There were no signs of a fetus. It was as if it had just disappeared, leaving her placenta and the umbilical cord behind, intact. There was no baby there. I stepped back from her and took off my gloves. I rubbed my eyes. That had to be impossible. Her tummy had been perfectly round, and I'm pretty sure there would have been signs if she'd given birth before or after dying. It was inhumane, unnatural. Everything indicating a pregnancy existed, all except for the baby. I carefully closed her up, trying not to think about the missing baby and the symbols, then filled the report. I wrote suicide on it. I wasn't 100% sure of that. I didn't need to be. They'd been clear with the instructions. Just get it done. Fast. I creaked the door open and peered into the hallway. The clattering had come from the supply room, and I hadn't heard the door open or close, so what had done it was still there. I approached it slowly, holding my breath, as if I were afraid to make a sound. I placed my hand on the doorknob and twisted. Click. It was locked. on the inside. I knocked. "Hey," I whispered, "is anyone there?" What followed was an unusual sound, something like someone sucking the air through their teeth. I looked back to the hallway, ending with the morgue. The door was swinging open. I couldn't remember if I'd closed it or not, and I didn't want to. I decided my job was finished there. I closed up and got into my car, then drove home in silence. I live alone, so me coming home at 3 a.m. would not disturb anyone. After doing my night routine and going to bed, I found myself twisting and turning, strange dreams pressing onto me, like the ones you have when you have a fever. I thought I heard a cry at one point, until I realized it had been my own. I opened my eyes after what seemed like minutes to discover it was a little over 6 a.m. In the soft glow of the morning, my window had fogged up a bit, and I couldn't help but stare, perplexed, at the fresh print of a child's hand on inside of the glass.